He turned my mourning into dancing. Is there anybody that's your testimony? Wasn't that amazing? Come on, can you give it up for them? Anointed feet. Wow. Wow. That was amazing. We praise God for their ministry. Come on, let's appreciate them one more time. Somebody came today to be encouraged that he'll turn your mourning into dancing. And I can testify as one of many that since the last time we were here together, we've lost 800,000 people to a pandemic, but we're still here. He's turned our mourning into dancing, allowing us to be able to gather again as the body of Christ. And so good morning to everyone. You may be seated. I'm going to talk a minute. That's a preacher trick to get your nerves down. Even though this is home, I feel at home. I've been coming here a long time. I'm a friend of the family, not just the Dixon family, the Center of Hope family. And so I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I tell you, my name keep coming up. I don't know how. God's doing it. But I am grateful to Pastor Jeremy, my friend and brother, and such an innovator, such a creative gift to the body of Christ. He is your pastor. Would you celebrate him with me? Thank you, my friend. He's a blessing. He's a blessing. And then his lovely wife, my soror, Lady Adrian, for her incredible work that she's doing. Last time I was here, she told me about the mission work that she's involved in. And I'm so grateful just to be able to stand here in your presence as well. I have never walked that path, but I've watched a strong First Lady for 60 years. And so I know that you're doing a wonderful job. Your cousin is actually preaching for me this morning at New Mount Calvary. I bring you greetings from my church. Hi, my church. If you're watching online, yes, I'm not there. But have church anyway. Amen? And hopefully you're at church. To your wonderful children, this is their day. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that part of being a PK. So I'll just say for now that we acknowledge them. To Lady Barbara. She's over here. All right, it's dark. There she is. Lady Barbara has been a support and an encouragement for so many years, and I always honor you. I honor you for who you are. I honor you for standing with Bishop Dixon, and I thank God for him who opened these doors to me originally, and that his legacy continues through you and your children. I honor you. Sora Jonelle, PK, I honor you. I honor you. I have a sister. There's only two of us. My sister is the older sister, but she thinks I'm the oldest. It's kind of weird like that. Sometimes the baby becomes the oldest because of the responsibility. But every now and then, because she's the oldest, she'll flare up. And she'll let them know, now that's my baby sister you messing with. It's nothing like having your sister or your brother walk with you in ministry. It's nothing like it. A day and time when siblings are jealous, resentful, bitter. When you have a sibling like you've been to your brother, God's going to bless you. God's going to bless you. And he has blessed you. And then to Reverend Beaver, who's with me today, Reverend Donisha Beaver. She serves as our executive minister. I don't go too many places completely by myself. She's with me today, and I thank God for her. She's walked with me this whole time I've been in ministry. So I ask that you just applaud her efforts in being with me today. So we're here to congratulate you. 10 big ones, huh? Yeah. That's saying something in this day and time. 10 years. Statistics say that most pastors only make it 4 years. 10 years is a blessing. And then to do it and navigate a church through a pandemic. I'm taking my time because you deserve somebody to say this. See, when you're a legacy pastor, when you step into the shoes of another pastor, especially if they were your father, there's always comparison. There's always the shadow. But how you have navigated a space that your father never had to navigate, he would be proud. Am I right? Last week's message, Pastor Chambers talked about the dilemma of honor, and I was blessed by that message. And then I tuned in this morning by mistake. I should not have watched. Whew. Pastor Daniels, didn't he preach? Oh my goodness, Pastor Joshua Daniels. My only exception, my only request is that you remember that he's 29. He's 29. And give me some grace, amen. But when I listened to Pastor Daniel's message as I was trying to get here hurriedly, we had some similar things, so you may see how the Holy Spirit works. I believe there's a word for the house. For those of you who are watching online, we appreciate you. And thank you, too. I know I have some sorors who are watching. They stayed around from the 8 o'clock service and said they would be watching. So I honor you and I salute you as well. Let's go to the word now. I've got my nerves out. And share with you what the Lord has given me. I do solicit your prayers. Amen. Don't care how long you've been doing this. You need somebody to pray for you. Is that right? You need somebody to pray with you. Let's go to Luke's Gospel, chapter 8. I'm using the New American Standard. That's just the text that I'm comfortable with. Whatever version you have, I'm sure is fine. Verse 22 says, again, I'm reading at 22. We'll just go to 26. I believe. We'll see how the Holy Ghost does it, okay? Okay. It says, now on one of those days, and Pastor Jeremy, when I read this earlier, I said, you know, I'd never seen that before. Because that's when things happen on just regular, ordinary days. When you're minding your own business. Now, on one of those days, Jesus and his disciples got into a boat. And he said to them, see, we're back on the water. Let's cross over to the other side of the lake. So they launched out. But as they were sailing along, he, being Jesus, fell asleep. And a fierce gale of wind descended on the lake. And they began to be swamped and to be in danger. Verse 24 says, they came up to Jesus and they woke him, saying, Master, Master, we are perishing. And he got up and rebuked the wind and the surging waves, and they stopped, and it became calm. And he said to them, where is your faith? But they were fearful and amazed, saying to one another, who then is this, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? I want to go back just to I think this is verse 23. It says, but as they were sailing along, he fell asleep, and a fierce gale of wind descended on the lake, and they began to be swamped and to be in danger. My message is entitled, Storm Watch. Storm Watch. Pray with me. A few years ago, before the quarantine, some of us traveled to New Orleans to our sorority convention. While we were there, they placed everyone in New Orleans on storm watch. In fact, we ended up having to leave early in light of Tropical Storm Barry. And as we sit here today, we have friends, some of us do, and family who are dealing with the aftermath of the hurricane in Florida. Seems like every year this time, somebody is under storm watch. The Bible speaks to storms and uses them to relate to the trials and tribulations that we go through in life. 1 Peter 4:12 says, beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial that has come upon you, as though something strange were happening to you. James 1:2-4 says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers, meaning various trials and temptations, knowing, what are you going to know about this? That the trying of your faith is working on something. It's working patience. See, someone once said, you are either coming out of a storm. Have you ever heard that before? Going into a storm, or you're in one right now. So as I'm preaching to you here at Center of Hope, and those of you who are watching online, I know that you're in one of those situations. You're either coming out, going in, or going through. And storms are something that each and every one of us must deal with. So that means that we must live in a constant state of storm watch. Is anybody following me? A constant state of readiness. The late Reverend Dr. E.V. Hill said this. He said this, and his son, Reverend E.V. Hill II, would say it as well. And I did not know this to be true until I got over 29. That anything can happen to anybody at any time. Life is funny like that. You're walking around minding your own business, taking care of your own responsibilities, and you'll get a phone call that will change the trajectory of your entire life. Is there anybody that's been there? So that means that we must live on storm watch. What is storm watch? I looked it up. It says a storm watch means that there is severe weather hasn't occurred yet, but upcoming weather conditions are expected to produce potentially dangerous weather such as heavy rain, hail, or strong gusts of winds. That's what Jesus was dealing with in the text. When they set out to go to the other side, there was nothing in their mind that said that a storm was going to come up. And just like you and I, when we go to the doctor, for a regular physical. Nothing in our mind says that there's going to see something on the result. And just like that, you move into a state of readiness to deal with whatever it is that's going to be dealing with you. Because anything can happen to anybody at any time. Well, can I let you in on a secret? Your pastor and his family live on storm watch. Your pastor and his family deal with storms all the time. And not just their own storms. Somebody, Jesus, help me. But they deal with your storms. And so once a year, you take out time to say thank you for being with me in my storm. Today's celebration is to honor his children. And I think this is wonderful, Center of Hope. I think it's wonderful. I grew up as a pastor's kid my whole life. And anniversary time, we had the matching outfits. Some of y'all remember how you used to do. We walked down the aisle. We sat on our little seat. The aisle, yeah, we walked down the aisle back then. You walked down the aisle. And the whole church would be kind to us. And that's a good thing. Because preachers and pastors' children go through a lot. They will never forget your kindness today. I can remember many of the sacrifices that I had to make as a child to support my parents' ministry. Preachers and pastors' children often feel neglected, overlooked, or they're overly criticized, held to a different standard. Everybody thinks they're your mother and father. Everybody feels that they can tell you what to do. So it's good that you're taking out time to show appreciation. So how do we prepare when we live in a constant state of storm watch? You have an earthquake kit for your house, right? Everybody, you know where it is? I hope you do. It's in your car. If you have an earthquake kit and a preparation kit for your house, how do you pack a storm kit for the trials of life? Because I promise you, if you're not in one right now, you got one coming. I didn't come to scare anybody. I just came to tell the truth. Into every life, some rain must fall. Now, in this text, in this familiar story, we find out 4 things that can help us to prepare for the trials of life. First thing we see in the text is when we're confronted with these storms, we must remember or consider what is God's intention in our storm. Somebody say God's intention. It's going to be 4 eyes because I'm still illiterate. God's intention. God's intention. So verse 22 says that Jesus and his disciples got into a boat and they were going to the other side, and he tells them, let's cross over, and they launch out. What did God intend for the storm? Jesus had a plan, and that plan was that they were going to make it to the other side. Have you ever set out to do a good deed only to end up not being able to do it? I know I have. I wanted to be there for people, and I haven't been able to show up. I wanted to give, and I haven't been able to do it. I failed in some ways. However, what I want you to know this morning is that God never fails. God's plans cannot be thwarted. Now, we may never go through a literal storm on the Sea of Galilee, but we do go through the storms of life. And your storm may be when someone dies unexpectedly, when you get sick, when you lose your job, when you lose your house, when you lose your loved one, when you lose your spouse, whatever it may be. But do know this: if God has a plan for you, it will be fulfilled. What can we do when heartache comes knocking on our door or we feel overcome by despair? We must remember that God's plan is bigger than ours. Jesus always planned for them to make it to the other side. And so the question you got to ask yourself when you're hit by the storms of life is, God, what do you intend for this storm? Are you going to make me stronger? Are you going to make me wiser? Are you going to make me better? Are you going to help me have a prayer life? Are you going to help me learn how to fast? Are you going to help me learn how to trust you? What is your plan? I had a plan. You had a plan. But how many times do we say, God, if you sent this in my life, what you going to do with it? Woo! What is your intention? Because you promised me that you're going to help me get through. You're going to help me get to the other side. So what is your intention in the process? Some of us have to learn to humble ourselves. That's God's intention. Some of us have to learn how to pray and not just get up after 5 minutes, but to tarry there. That's God's intention. Some of us have to learn that we can't depend on our pastor to get us out of every jam, but that we got to be able to talk to the Lord and trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not to our own understanding, knowing that in all of our ways we acknowledge him and he shall direct our path. God, what do you want to do? What is your intention? When we go into a storm, we got to say, God, help me see what you want to do with this, so that I understand, because I know you're going to make sure that my work is completed. You're going to get me to the other side. Philippians 1:6 says, being confident of this very thing. So you got to be confident when you get in a storm. You got to put your back out. You got to be confident and say that he who has begun a good work in you, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what the doctor is saying. I don't care what the mortgage company is saying. I don't care what that boss is saying. I don't even care what the church folks are saying. If you began a good work in us, then you're able to complete it. You're able to complete it, and the storms are not going to wash out your work. He's able to complete it. He intends to finish the work that he started in you. And so I know when I get into the storm, it's not over now. Because God's intending to bring me out. See, that's a word for somebody right now that needs to know whatever storm you're in, God's intending to bring you through. It may look bleak, it may look dark right now, but God is intending to bring you out. Here's the second lesson we learn from the text. We've got to know what is God's interpretation. What's God's interpretation of this storm? Verse 23 says, but as they were sailing along, Jesus fell asleep. Jesus has the nerve to fall asleep in the storm. And how many of you would be honest, like with me, and I'm being honest with you, that I've had some storms where I really thought that God was not listening. I thought he wasn't paying attention. The disciples go to him and they wake him up because they think they're dying. But what they don't realize is that the storm was not as big to Jesus as it was to them. Oh my God, today. When we are in a storm, we have got to realize that whatever we're facing is not a big deal to God as it is to us. Yes, it looks bad. Yes, it looks bleak. And yes, it looks terrible. But God is saying, I need you to see it through my eyes. I need you to see it through the eyes of the one who is a healer. I need you to see it through the eyes of the one who is a keeper. I need you to see it through the eyes of the one who is a deliverer. I need you to see it through my eyes. What is God's interpretation? I know what your interpretation is. But what is God's interpretation? There's nothing you can do about your storm, but there's everything that God can do about it. You can't fix it, but God can. We used to sing a song, he may not come when you want him. Anybody remember the old church? But he'll show up right on time. We must realize that God doesn't see the storm the way we see it. And sometimes, Pastor, when we're pastoring, things look so big to us. Things look so insurmountable to us. Things look so much like we're never going to get out, never going to get through, we're never going to get whatever. And we have to understand that God has been doing church forever. He said, upon this rock, I will build my church. Not Dawson's church, not Dixon's church, but my church. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So we cannot interpret what's happening in the church local, the church universal through our eyes. We must interpret it through God's eyes. So what is God's interpretation in the storm? Because unless we pray and say, God, how are you seeing this storm? Help me see it the way you see it. We're not going to understand it. We're not going to understand it. When my father died, we knew we had 14 months to get ready. We put all the documents in place. We organized the ministries. We set the plan for the budget. But there was no way for me to know then what I know now. I had no idea what was going to happen and how God was going to hold it together in the midst of infighting and issues. I had no idea because I did not know how to interpret that storm. I thought it was going to fall apart. Can I just be honest with you? I thought we're not going to make it. How can we make it? The patriarch is gone. They're putting a woman in, and we've never had a woman, and what's going to happen? And I didn't know how to interpret that storm. But God was teaching us that his thoughts are not our thoughts, that his ways are not our ways, that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And now, 12 years later, God is still keeping us. God is still growing us. God is still helping us. Not because I'm so great, listen, but I decided to say, God, show me your interpretation of this storm. So I ask you to ask God, what's his interpretation of your storm? God uses the dark, scary, uncertain times of life as an opportunity for him to demonstrate his power and not ours. For him to get the glory and not us. God wants to use our trials to get us closer to him. See, faith is taking God at his word despite the circumstances. And faith is often claiming God's promise even in the midst of the storm. Trusting that what he sees, his interpretation, is greater because he has a greater purpose. Is there anyone here that can testify that when you look back over your life, when you look back at the trials that God has already brought you through, that you may not have understood it then, but you understand it now? See, you had to get sick because God wanted to prove to some people in your family that he was a healer. You had to experience those losses and setbacks because it just set you up for a greater blessing. See, it had to happen. And when we understand that whatever it is, it had to happen. We didn't see it coming, but God allowed it to happen because he's using it as a stepping stone. See, God's interpretation is it's just a stepping stone. Somebody say it's a stepping stone. It's a stepping stone. It's a stepping stone to greatness. It's a stepping stone to greater. It's just a stepping stone. Now I want to really put something on your heart, and even if you're watching out there, can you let it come out your mouth? Lord, use my stepping stone. Lord, use my stepping stone. That's so that I can understand the interpretation that he has of our storm. Point number 3 says that God not only has an interpretation and an intent, but he has an inclination. He has an inclination. What is an inclination? He's inclined to hear us. Look at verse 24. It says, they came to Jesus, you know the story, and they woke him up, Master, Master, don't you care that we're perishing? And sometimes when we're in our storms, we get crazy. We pray those crazy prayers. God, are you listening? We start to get a little uncomfortable, a little unnerved. Our faith gets a little weak. I'm just being honest, our faith gets a little weak. The Bible says the ship was filled with water. It means that they were losing control of the ship, and the water was now controlling the ship. But rather than the boat controlling the boat, the storm was controlling the boat. Listen, I got to talk to somebody that you're going through a storm and your boat is controlling your storm. I got to talk to somebody that right now you're out of control because you don't know if you can hear God speaking to you anymore. I got to talk to somebody that the enemy is trying to get you so messed up in your mind that you end up thinking that it's over. I came to testify that it's not over until God says it's over. I came to testify that he's not asleep. I came to testify that he hears your every prayer. I came to testify that he's just waiting. He's inclined himself. Psalms 34, 17 and 18 says the righteous cry. Are you the righteous? It says the righteous cry and the Lord hears them. Glory to God. And delivers them. Not out of some of their trouble, but all. Somebody say all. All of their troubles. He inclines himself to hear you. That's his nature. He's listening in the midnight hour. I'll get happy. He's listening. He's listening when you're laying awake and you're tossing and turning. God hears you. He has an ear that's pitched just for your voice. Oh, I'm going to run out of here. Listen, they tell me in studies that mothers can hear their babies. We have a daycare at our church, a nursery that's on the floor, on the first floor, and the young adult mother's classroom is on the second floor. The babies are on the first floor. The young adult mothers are on the second floor. When they come to Sunday school, they drop off the babies, and they go up to the second floor. There's 5 or 6 babies on the first floor. But when one baby cries, the mother knows that's her baby. They don't look around and say, is that your baby? Is that your baby? That mother grabs her purse. And you know how we used to do. And she's gone. Because she knows her baby. Here's my analogy. We serve a God that knows your voice. We can call him Abba Father. So when I'm crying out in Compton, and you're crying out in Inglewood, and somebody else is crying out in Linwood, and somebody else is crying out in Torrance, and somebody else is crying out in Bellflower, he's not up there going, is that Sonja? Is that Jeremy? He hears my voice, and he hastens to my voice. When I'm in a storm, God is inclined to hear me. He shows up. He shows out. He inclines himself. It's good to know that he's up there. I can just picture him. Can I take my time? Who's preaching after this? Let me get through. I like to think about the fact that when I'm praying, he's just listening. He's leaning over the banister of heaven saying, does he need something? Does she need something? Jesus wanted them to know, I'm not asleep. I just know that this storm is no issue for me. It may have messed you up, but it's not a problem for me. All I got to do is when I get ready, speak one word. And his whole situation is going to change. So we got to know when we're in a storm, he's inclined to hear us. Here's my last point. We have God's intervention. He intervenes in our storms. Yeah, he has an intention. He intends to bring us out. He has an interpretation. He knows what he's going to do with this problem and this issue. He has an inclination to hear your cry and my cry. And then he positions himself to intervene on our behalf. Look at verse 25. It says, and he says to them, where is your faith? See, these disciples had seen other miracles before, but notice what they said. What manner of man is this? Because the way he intervened blew their mind. Oh, see, they had seen him heal the sick. They had seen him feed 5,000. They had seen him raise the dead. But who is this that can speak to the elements of nature and it can calm down? And sometimes we don't understand who we're rolling with. Sometimes we don't fully get it that the God of the universe, the God who put the sun in the sky, the moon and the stars, who formed the earth, who created man and woman, the God who opened up the sea for Moses, who shut the lion's mouth for Daniel, the same God who gave Moses the Ten Commandments, the same God who was with Peter, James, and John, and Ruth, and Rahab, and Sarah, and Deborah, the same God that was with Bishop Dixon and Bishop Reed and Pastor Dawson, the same God is with us. And he will intervene when he gets ready. And when he does, he just has to speak a word. And even the laws of nature will stop at his command. Even the wind recognizes his authority. See, the storm was a platform for God to get the glory. Can I say that again? The storm was a platform for God to get the glory. Can I make it personal? Your storm is God's platform for him to get the glory. My storm is God's platform for him to get the glory. I don't understand what he's doing all the time. I don't understand how he's going to work it out. I don't understand how he's going to provide my every need. I don't understand how it's going to come together. But I know that this storm is God's platform. This church is God's platform. We're not here to lift up man. We're here to show you what God can do in a storm. Oh, I'm getting excited. See, I don't know about you, but God has shown me over all these years that if I take my hands off of it and I give it to him, he's able to work it out. I had to understand that he was bigger than I am, that his mind was greater than my mind, and that he knew what I did not know. I had to understand what Romans teaches. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. I came to tell somebody that you are not facing this storm by yourself. He will never leave you nor forsake you. He says that when you walk through the fire, he will be with you. He says that when you walk through the storm, he will be with you. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they shall comfort me. See, the disciples learned something that day. They learned that their faith was not big enough for their God, that their circumstances could not be outmeasured by the goodness of their God. And there may be somebody here, your faith is in your family. Your faith is in your property. Your faith is in your possessions. But I want you to know all that's going to pass away. You got to keep your hand in God's hand. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust. I dare not trust. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean, wholly lean, wholly lean, wholly lean, wholly lean on Jesus' name, on Christ, on Christ, on Christ, on Christ, on Christ. Are you leaning on Christ? On Christ, not my money. On Christ, not my physical health. On Christ, not my emotional health. On Christ, not anything that the world has to offer, but on Christ, the solid, the solid, the solid, the solid rock I stand. All of the ground, 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 woo, all of the ground. Sinking sand, it's sinking sand, yes, woo, Jesus. God has a plan. God has a way. And all you got to do is be ready. Be ready. Now, what does this have to do with your pastor? Your pastor lives on storm watch. Your pastor's family lives on storm watch. Pastor Dixon, all you got to do is keep your hand in God's hand. Stand on the solid rock, which is Jesus Christ. Don't let anything or anybody turn you around. And he'll take you through your storms. But here's your part. You got to be on storm watch too. Bible says the enemy desires to strike the shepherd so that the sheep will scatter. Don't you think with all this stuff that your pastor's doing that the devil is mad? How you are feeding people, adopting kids, and 2 and 3 different churches. Don't you think the devil is mad? Don't you think there's some people in the city that are mad and jealous? So your job is to watch and pray and be on storm watch. In fact, I want to commission you today. I'm going to be on storm watch. Raise your hand all over this building. I'm going to be on storm watch. Not just for my issues, but I'm going to cover my pastor. I'm going to cover my first lady. I'm going to cover their children. I'm going to cover his mother. My mother, I can't tell you her age. My mother's still living. But don't you know that I have to preach? I have to minister. I have to take care of all these people. And at the end of the day, I got to take care of my mama. I told my daddy before he closed his eyes, I'm going to take care of her. But I need some people that are on storm watch. Because the enemy desires to sift us as wheat. I'm not talking about what I heard. He stands, he got so much energy, he's smiling all the time. That man is going through some things. And you need to be on storm watch. Can you do that? I know we want to talk about all the good things, but I came to tell you the truth. It's not easy. But if you got some people praying for you, when you got a church that loves you, like this church loves its pastor and wife, when you got a church that understands what God is doing with the storms in his life and is praying him through, then you never have to worry. You know he's covered by his family and by his church. So I leave you with the words of this familiar gospel song. Like a ship that's tossed and driven, battered by an angry sea. When the storms of life are raging and their fury falls on me. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I wonder, what have I done to make this race so hard to run? Then I say to my soul, ah! The Lord will make a way somehow. Stay on storm watch, Center of Hope. Stay on storm watch.